The sun always rose slower on our cul-de-sac. Nestled between neat suburban lawns and rule-book-perfect hedges, the homes in Willow Creek were lined up like good little children waiting for a treat. Every porch was a copy of the next, every mailbox the same dull bronze with the HOA-approved decal. It was a picture-perfect neighborhood if you liked sameness and silence, but I never did. That's why my house looked different. From the curb, it was already a rebellion. Pastel-painted fence posts, flower boxes in every color imaginable, and my pride and joy, a wide-open butterfly garden that swept across the front yard and into the backyard, designed to attract the endangered monarchs during their migration. I had spent 5 years cultivating milkweed, goldenrod, butterfly bush, and echinacea. I'd spoken to university entomologists. I got an estate-level environmental designation. My garden wasn't just for show. It was a living, fluttering haven of protected habitat. And Karen hated it. Karen Whitaker lived 2 houses down and across the street. Blonde bob, beige clothes, HOA president. Her house was a shrine to symmetry and dullness. A flag always hung at exactly the right angle. The grass measured an even 2 inches year-round. Her car, a spotless white BMW, never dared to drip a drop of oil onto her driveway. And she never once missed a chance to remind others of the rules. From the moment I moved in 3 years ago, we clashed. At first, it was small things. She sent warnings about unauthorized paint colors on my fence, even though I'd filed for approval and received it. Then she called the HOA on me for unregulated plant growth, referring to my native pollinator bushes. I showed them my permits. She doubled down. I complied once, then I stopped. She smiled too much, the kind of smile that says, "I'll bury you under paperwork." But the garden, that was sacred. Every spring and summer, the butterflies came in droves. Children from the neighborhood visited to see the monarchs and pipevine swallowtails. People came from other blocks to walk the stone paths I'd laid. Sometimes I even hosted school groups for tours. I had signs laminated and staked into the soil, certified Monarch way station. I was on the EPA's National Pollinator Registry, and Karen, in all her HOA glory, couldn't touch that. She tried. Lord, did she try. Until the summer she snapped. It was early July, one of those rare, breezy mornings when the sun wasn't trying to melt your skin. I was in the backyard, checking the pupae on the milkweed when I heard the unmistakable sound of a pressurized sprayer, the kind used for industrial pesticides. I stood up. The smell hit me first. I ran through the side gate barefoot and rounded the house to see Karen, in a sun hat and gloves, spraying directly over the fence into my front garden. Her eyes narrowed behind her aviators as the mist settled onto the plants like a death cloud. My echinacea sagged immediately. A butterfly dropped mid-flight. "What the hell are you doing?" I screamed, lunging toward the gate. Karen turned calmly, her lips tight. "Just taking care of a little neighborhood problem. These weeds are attracting pests. I've had 3 bees sting my grandson because of your jungle. You sprayed my property." She held up a bottle. It was neon orange, the kind you only find in agricultural supply stores. The label read, Axantex P3, not for residential use, restricted use only by licensed applicator. I snapped a photo, then 10 more.
She walked off, shrugging. Should have planted roses like the rest of us. That night, my garden wilted like it was morning. Over the next 2 days, over 100 butterflies died. I counted them. I collected them. Their wings lay in the dirt like shattered stained glass. My milkweed turned brown. The swallowtail larvae curled up and dropped. It wasn't just aesthetic damage, it was ecological devastation. The entire microhabitat was wiped out. But Karen had no idea what she'd done. That was her mistake. She thought it was just flowers and bugs. She didn't know she had trespassed onto federally protected territory. I went to work. First, I contacted the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. I sent them everything: Before and after photos, chemical traces, residue samples. I forwarded my certification as a protected butterfly conservation site and attached the toxicology report from a local lab that confirmed the presence of illegal pesticide residue. Then I called the Department of Fish and Wildlife. The monarch butterfly, recently listed under the Endangered Species Act, had been actively nesting in my yard for 2 years. The caterpillar she'd killed were federally protected. I had dated photos, location stamps, even a log of larval progress. And I didn't stop there. I posted on the community Facebook group explaining in detail how my HOA president had violated federal laws by using unauthorized chemicals without a license, trespassing on private property, and destroying a protected habitat. Then I hired a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, Miles Dawkins, an environmental law specialist and ex-EPA enforcement officer. The moment I told him what happened, he grinned like a kid at a fireworks show. "You realize she's on the hook for at least 6 different violations," he said. "Oh, I'm counting," I replied. It took a week for the EPA to respond, but when they did, they came hard. 2 agents showed up on my doorstep with cameras and sample kits. They were thorough. Collected soil samples, photographed every inch of the damage, interviewed neighbors who had witnessed Karen spraying. Turns out she bragged about it at her book club. One of the attendees, a quiet woman named June from Elm Street, messaged me. "Karen said you were about to learn your place. I'm so sorry. She crossed a line." Yes. Yes, she had. By the end of the month, she was served. A federal notice, a subpoena, an EPA enforcement letter, then a second one from the state pesticide regulation office. HOA meetings exploded. Karen tried to explain herself, said I'd lied, that my garden wasn't special, that she was protecting the community. But the documents didn't lie, and neither did the dead butterflies I'd preserved in labeled glass jars, which I brought to the next public meeting and placed right on the podium. "This," I said, "is what she killed." Karen didn't look up. I didn't stop there. I called the local news. They ran a segment, "Protected Habitat Destroyed by HOA President." I gave them a tour of the ruined garden, the EPA tags, the laminated permit. The headline went viral. Online activists picked it up. I was contacted by 2 wildlife preservation groups and 1 eco-law podcast. Karen's smile was gone. Her BMW sat unused for days. I heard she had to hire a lawyer, then another. Her homeowner's insurance refused to cover intentional environmental destruction. The HOA began discussing her removal. Neighbors whispered. And the best part? That was just part 1 of her nightmare.
Because the real storm was still coming. The letter from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service arrived on a Monday morning, crisp and heavy with the weight of consequence. I held it in my hands like a trophy. The federal seals stamped across the envelope felt like justice forged in iron. Inside, it outlined the full extent of Karen's violations. Her unauthorized pesticide use didn't just kill butterflies. It wiped out larvae and eggs from an active, federally documented monarch breeding ground. Under Section 9 of the Endangered Species Act, it was unlawful to harass, harm, pursue, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, trap, capture, or collect any endangered species or to destroy their habitat. Karen had done all of that, on camera no less. They fined her $75,000. No negotiation, no warning, just cold, legal thunder. The pesticide she used, a Sentex P3, wasn't just illegal to spray in residential areas without a license. It had recently been linked to bee colony collapse and aquatic toxicity. The EPA's forensic team had confirmed the residue not only in my soil, but in runoff that leaked into a storm drain system nearby. That meant municipal pollution was now involved. The city wasn't happy. I almost felt bad. Almost. She tried to claim innocence, claimed I planted all this to bait her, as if I'd spent 5 years cultivating a nationally certified pollinator zone just to set a trap. Her lawyer repeated the same desperate line during the first hearing. Ms. Whitaker was unaware of the garden's status. But my garden had 5 signs. One by the mailbox, 2 staked along the front edge, 1 at the side gate, another right where she sprayed. All laminated, all state-issued, with barcodes, QR codes, and EPA reference numbers. Willful ignorance wasn't a defense, not under federal law. That's when the dominoes really started to fall. The HOA held an emergency meeting after the fines became public. Dozens of residents showed up, packed shoulder to shoulder in the Willow Creek Community Center. I sat in the back, silent, as Karen stood red-faced at the podium, blaming everyone but herself. She claimed I exaggerated the damage, that I'd weaponized environmentalism, that she only sprayed a little. Then I stood up, and one by one, I laid out the facts. Photos, lab reports, soil samples, emails, witness statements, the laminated signs, the dead butterflies in labeled glass containers, and even a video a neighbor had taken from across the street of Karen spraying, with the timestamp to match. Then I read aloud from the EPA's report. High concentrations of banned chemical substances in a certified Monarch migration corridor. Property damage determined to be intentional. Violation of multiple state and federal codes. Subject eligible for further civil and criminal prosecution. Silence fell over the room like a sheet of ice. The board voted 6-1 to remove her as president. She didn't even get to vote for herself. Her ally, Mark from Lot 12, abstained when he saw the documents. After that, the storm kept rolling. Her homeowner's insurance declined to cover any of her legal damages, citing her willful use of restricted chemicals. Her pesticide violation alone carried a potential civil penalty of $25,000 per day, and the EPA wasn't in the mood to be lenient. Her personal assets became the next battleground. Her pristine BMW sold. Her lake house in Pine Creek listed. Her husband, a quiet man who rarely showed up to meetings, had apparently filed for separation. Whether from shame or to protect his financial interests, I didn't know. And the best part? I wasn't done. With help from Miles Dawkins, my environmental lawyer, I filed a civil lawsuit. We weren't asking for just compensation. We wanted an example made. Damages included full restoration costs of the garden, loss of a certified educational habitat, emotional distress, loss of school group visits and grant funding, violation of privacy and trespassing, destruction of federally protected wildlife. Total, $112,000. She scoffed at first, then went pale when she realized I wasn't bluffing. I had documentation stretching back years, supported by 2 universities and 3 local conservation groups. The lawsuit became public knowledge. Local media picked up the story again. HOA president faces massive fine for destroying protected butterfly habitat. She stopped leaving her house. The once perfect lawn grew patchy. The seasonal wreath on her door stayed up far too long. Her porch light burned out and wasn't replaced. Even the mailbox she had polished daily now leaned slightly to one side. Neighbors began to cross the street when walking past her house. Others pulled their kids away when she came outside. Some quietly apologized to me for not standing up sooner. "I didn't know she could do something so cruel," one said. But I did. I always did. Meanwhile, my garden, rebuilt with the help of conservationists and volunteers, began to bloom again.
The National Pollinator Foundation sponsored new signage and offered a grant for habitat rebuilding. We brought in native plants that could resist soil toxicity. Local high school students helped install new butterfly observation stations. The mayor even issued a proclamation calling my garden a model for urban ecological stewardship. The butterflies returned. Late October brought the largest wave of monarchs we'd ever recorded. Their orange and black wings flared against the sunlight like flickering candles in a cathedral of green. The garden, once violated, was now sacred. We installed cameras, live feeds that streamed the butterfly migration online. Karen couldn't escape it. Every time she logged on, turned on the news, or looked down the street, she saw what she tried to kill, thriving. Her house went up for sale in November. It sat for months. No buyers. Realtors whispered about the stigma. Some blogs called it the butterfly crime house. Eventually, it was sold at a loss, $70,000 under market value, to a young couple who immediately tore out the manicured hedges and planted clover and wild thyme. The HOA had changed too. We amended the bylaws to protect pollinator zones. Pesticide restrictions were implemented. A new committee was formed, not to enforce rules, but to preserve beauty. We called it the Garden Watch. I was elected as its first chair. Funny, isn't it? The woman who tried to enforce blind conformity ended up creating the very change she feared. By spring, the neighborhood was buzzing, literally. More wildflowers, more color, more butterflies. Kids ran barefoot between gardens, chasing flight patterns and drawing wings in chalk on the sidewalk. And me? I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, a monarch fluttering near my shoulder, and smiled. Karen had tried to make me feel small. Instead, she made my garden immortal. It became a case study, a state-certified sanctuary, a community landmark. Her name, once spoken with authority, was now nothing more than a footnote in a legal document. But every butterfly that soared above the garden she tried to kill, that was a signature she could never erase. You see, gardens don't forget, and butterflies always return.